Isabella Baranowska asking, do you prefer to write the perspective of Lucas or the criminals?
Well, that's a hard question because, and I don't really know how to answer it uh, because basically you have Lucas is a character that everybody knows. I mean, the fans know, and so he's like a set personality. Uh, so the critical personalities for my novels are the criminals because I have to create a good new one every book. So um, if you look at chapter 2, which is where I usually introduce Davenport, uh, you'll see that it becomes somewhat repetitious, but I have to do that for new readers. I have to explain who he is and everything. But most fans know. Um, but the thriller, I mean, excuse me, the murderer or the main criminals in the book are new every time. So that's always a treat to be able to write somebody who's new.
A question from Evelina Galova. Davenport and Weather are quite well off financially, yet they've not been on a trip to Europe or Asia or anywhere outside North America. Will they travel and maybe get involved in some sort of a mess overseas?
Probably not. The fact of the matter is that novels that are set overseas don't sell as well as novels set in the United States. People like scenes that they can recognize and that they can, kind of get their head around. And since I'm writing for largely an American audience, most of Davenport's stuff is going to be here. I did mention that in a recent book that Lucas and Weather were planning to go to Europe, where they plan to spend quite a lot of money. Um, and so they go there, but basically I want the stories to be set here in the U.S.
Plus, you have some problems of if Lucas gets involved with a mess over there, he's an American law enforcement agent. He's way outside of his jurisdiction. And
he has no authority there, whatever. Yeah. Now, there are ways to get around that. Essentially he would be acting illegally, but he hasn't been completely reluctant to do that in the past, to act illegally when he thought it was necessary. But the other problem is that while I have spent some time in France and Germany and England, I'm not really comfortable with those cultures at the level that I need to be to write thrillers because I'm not an international thriller writer. I don't. I really don't know how their police forces work. I know that the British police force, for example, is considerably different than American police forces in what they're allowed to do, in what they feel ethical about doing, and I don't know what all those things are. I don't know the small ins and outs. All I know is what I read in British thrillers, which are quite good, but they're also very different than American thrillers.
Do you think you could ever get a Jack Reacher type character in a British thriller? It just doesn't quite work in the setting.
No, the thing is that the Brits, the British, always seem to me to have a more, I don't know exactly how to put this, but they have more respect for the law. In the United States, people will talk back to cops. We have defense lawyers here who will go to almost any limits to get their clients off. We have prosecutors who will go to almost any lengths to get a conviction. And the British, they take those kinds of things in a different way than we do. I think that they're much more respectful to police and to authority than Americans are, and that's a pretty critical difference.
Bill Womack wondering, I really enjoyed the short story Rhymes with Prey, which you co-authored with Jeff Devers. Any chance of you teaming up with Devers or, say, Lee Child for a longer piece?
Well, that was kind of a one-off thing to raise money for an organization I belong to, the
International Thriller Writers.
International Thriller Writers. We have a nice convention and a teaching session in New York City every summer. And I don't think that's going to happen again. It's actually hard to write with somebody else, especially somebody who has a really well-defined, long-established character like Lincoln Rhymes. And so it's just not easy to do, and it takes time away from my real work.
Rick Garner saying, I cheer when Lucas pushes the line a bit, breaking into a suspect's house or beating up a suspect. I cheer because we know Lucas is the good guy and we know who the bad guy is and we know he's going to do the right thing. But when I see some of the same kinds of procedures in the news, I feel a bit ashamed. Will you care to comment on the recent police abuse charges? Can our literature and police procedure show that the good guys crossing the line be a factor in how we react to these cases?
Well, I've got a couple of things to say about that. One of them is that when I was in the newspaper business, I was actually sent to a school, to a class at Northwestern University by the Center by the Miami Herald to study statistics and polling. One thing is that I would observe about that is that about there are tens of thousands of cops in the United States, and when you ask how many of them are competent, you find that you can't believe that more than 90% are competent. At least 10% of the cops are burnout, crooks, incompetent, stupid, poorly trained, and I think most people will say that it's more than 10%. But I say, okay, call it 10%. Then I've read recently that some 600,000 people a year are released from prisons. And of that 600,000 people, perhaps 250,000 of them are black. So now we have this situation in which cops are accused of abusing blacks, of systematic abuse of blacks. What I would point out is that when you have that many bad cops, when you have that many people who have been convicted of crimes and actually sent to prison and who are now on the streets again free, that they're going to run into each other all the time, and you're going to have a certain amount of these tragic events. I mean, they really are tragic events, but it's inevitable. It's not a sign of anything but numbers. It's inevitable. It can't be stopped. Or perhaps it could be stopped, but only with an enormous resources for training and for filtering people and for firing people and for getting rid of the police, the big chunks of the police forces we have now. And maybe that should be done, but I don't think it will be. One of the things is that hundreds of people in every state die every year in automobile accidents when they could reduce that simply by changing the speed limit down to 55 miles an hour, like it used to be. But people won't do that. Even to save hundreds of lives a year, they won't do it. So Americans are not going to spend enormous sums of money creating a highly competent, highly technological police force, using all the best methods with highly educated people to save a few lives a year. It just won't happen. So I think that these kinds of incidents that we've seen are inevitable. I hate to say that, but that's what I think. I have spent a lot of time with police forces and talking to police guys, and some of them are really, really smart, very ethical, very thoughtful, people who work very hard, and at the same time, I have met guys who are complete bums. So there's that. Now the thing about Davenport and sometimes doing unethical things is that Davenport isn't just about the law; he's also about morality. And so what he does may be illegal, but it's not immoral. He's desperately, in one case, searching for a serial killer who's killed a number of young women. He's not sure who it is until he breaks into the guy's house. He has no ability to legally enter that house because he has no real evidence. He just has a belief. He enters the house, finds the evidence, backs out of the house, creates some evidence that allows the police to go in and find the stuff that he knows is already there. What he does is illegal, but it's not immoral. He actually stops probably the slaying of more innocent young women in the future. That's different from a cop who shoots a running man in the back with a gun and kills him for what amounts to a minor crime. I now live in New Mexico, and a couple of years ago we had a horrendous execution of a homeless man by the Albuquerque police, who simply shot him with rifles. He was far away from them. He was actually moving away from them at the time they shot him. 2 cops have been charged with murder. Those things happen, and I think in the way that we run our police force in the United States, it doesn't make any difference whether the cops are white or black, or the victims are white or black. the numbers make this kind of tragedy inevitable.
What about things for media informing the way things happen? You had a few years ago one of the Supreme Court justices, and I'm blanking on which one, used Jack Bauer's behavior from 24, the television series, as a justification for enhanced interrogation techniques, basically saying because a fictional character did this, torture is okay, and that was a Supreme Court justice saying that.
Yeah, but that's stupid. I mean, Supreme Court justices, presidents of the United States, congressmen, senators. There are stupid examples in all of them. You can't justify anything based on fictional characters. Nothing can you justify based on the actions of fictional characters because the real world is much more complex. One of the things we do with thrillers is we simplify the way the world works. My books, I think, are about as complex as they get, as thrillers can get without losing momentum, which is a key thing with thrillers, is keeping the momentum going. But I am always astonished by how complex the real world is when it comes to crime, about the bizarre things that happen and about the bizarre things that cops have to deal with.